Welcome everyone. Today we have Bel Ryan with us from Ignite Art Therapies. Welcome, Bel.
Thank you for having me.
Bel is also a lecturer in our Bachelor of Arts Therapy here at Ikon at our Adelaide campus.
Yes.
So we've touched a little bit on the myths of art therapy when we've spoken previously.
Yes.
Are there any points that you wanted to expand on regarding the myths of art therapy?
I guess one of the biggest misconceptions is around the fact that you need to be good at art. And that's something that I constantly want to reiterate, because in art therapy, we're using the art as a means to explore and express and have a look at things rather than creating art that looks good. So it's all about what you do in the moment and how the art reflects things back. So it's like the art is the voice for what you're trying to explore and have a look at. So I guess that's the thing that people quite often freak out a little bit about the word art therapy, because they're like, oh, well, I'm not good at art. And so I want to reiterate that it's not actually about that. Don't let the fact that you're not an artist get in the way of coming and experiencing what art therapy is, because it's really powerful, and the symbolism and metaphor that plays out is really amazing, and you go to places that you never thought that you could go to because of the art and what it represents and what it speaks to you about. So that's one of the things. And also people quite generally, because children are very good at art and they don't have the inhibitions that we do as adults, somehow things sort of creep in, that quite often people think that art therapy is for children because they naturally have the imagination and curiosity and everything that happens with that. And so that's the thing. I really want to focus on adults because there's so much that we're carrying around with us, and art therapy really is for all ages. So from 0 maybe to 5 because there's a bit of play therapy that sort of happens as well with under 5s, but right through to the elderly as well. So art therapy really is for everyone. So they're probably the two that stand out the most that people sort of make comments to me about as well. And possibly, now just thinking about it, the whole idea that people think it's an art class. It's actually a space to explore and express and have a look at your life. So you may have something that isn't going so well, or you have a dream that you want to fulfill, or, you know, life is just feeling a bit ordinary. You might have had a big life event that you need to actually explore. So rather than coming to an art class to learn about the ins and outs of how you do a painting to go in an art gallery, it is about what's happening in your life. How do I explore this? How do I work through it? And how do I get what I would like to have out of life? So that's really what art therapy is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that you're always on the cutting edge of things with your practice. What do you think the next evolution of art therapy will be?
I've been doing a lot of thinking around the whole idea of why does art therapy work, and what is it about creativity and metaphor and symbolism that really works. And for me, I think it's about the whole idea of thinking differently. That when you think about all of the innovative people, you know, you think about Steve Jobs, who, you know, had a lot to do with Apple, you know, scientists, people who cure diseases. They're people who have thought outside of the box and done things a little bit differently. And so that's what I really want to explore a bit further, is how do we think differently so that we can see things from a new perspective. And art therapy actually does that. So the creativity allows us to see things differently, to look at it with new eyes, to see it from a completely different lens, and really innovate and see things that we didn't know were there before. And so that's what I would love to see, is art therapy being immersed in every industry. And that's why I think I'm really passionate about going into organisations. And it's not just about wellbeing programs. I think that it's really about, okay, in a boardroom, we've got some major decisions to make and we're stuck in it. So how do we use creativity and art therapy tools to really help people to explore that and work through it? How do we make a team come together? Because at the moment it's like they're in silos, they're all working individually. So how do we use creativity and art therapy to really help people connect? Because I think more than ever, we're so connected through technology, but lots of neuroscience and everything talks about the fact that we need to be person to person. Like, it literally changes our brain. And creativity is part of that as well, because you're using different parts of your brain, and the potential for what we could use it for is huge. But I really think in organisations, in team building, obviously wellness, because that's sort of our base, our foundation, but also how do we innovate and change and see new things. And I think thinking about things is really limiting, where when we can use art, creativity, different ways to do things, then we explore and express in a different way and new things can happen. And I think that's really exciting, especially using technology too. There's a whole huge potential for how we could use that as well. But I think nothing beats the hands-on, the kinesthetic, using your body, really having a look at things and experiencing things rather than just thinking about them. And that's what art therapy does so well. So I think the potential is huge. And obviously I'm still passionate about, I think there should be an art therapist in every school, and any helping profession should really have creativity as part of that, and having people who really can help guide people through what's happening for them, the good, the bad and the ugly, but also the dreaming sort of aspect and the innovation as well. So that's sort of my evolution that's brewing a little bit at the moment. It's like, how can we use creativity to be more effective, not be scared of it, and really help people to get where they want to be.
What inspires you in terms of your practice and the programs that you run around art therapy?
In my practice, I see lots of people one-on-one, and I think the common themes that keep coming out is what inspires me to create other programs and themed sessions and things like that. So for instance, at the moment, I've seen a theme of people being really stressed, like beyond just your normal everyday stress, because life isn't all sunshine and rainbows. We do have an element of stress that can help us to drive forward in our life, but also it can be really debilitating when it gets too much. And so that's where I've developed a 6-week program that will be starting the end of July, based around people wanting that connection, that time to reflect, because life is so chaotic and we're so busy being busy that we don't have that time and space to work out, well, how can I shift this? How can I work through this? But also, how can I connect with others? And so that's the theme that's sort of come up consistently with my clients recently. And so that's why that program is being developed as we speak. But also, I get inspired by every individual that I see. And the thing that I love about art therapy is we're not just sitting in a generic framework. Obviously there's some similarities that happen in each session, but each person is an individual, and what they're exploring is unique to them. And I love that art therapy allows a space, because the art helps with that, for people to explore exactly what they need to, and trusting that what they need to explore will come up through the art and we can work it out together. And I love that, because I'm the facilitator of that, but the client themselves are the ones who are in charge of where they go and what happens and how we navigate that. And I think that's really special and something really unique about art therapy. And I work in a very person-centered way, very empowered. There's no point in me giving advice or telling people what it is, because that's my perspective and that's about me. It is actually about the individual exploring what they need to explore as well. And one thing that I really find interesting is that quite often people, on the outside world seem to have it all together. Life is great, but they're very good at hiding what's really happening. And I love that space where the door gets closed and the mask can come off, and they can talk about, explore and express what's really happening for them. Or, there might be just this feeling that they can't quite put words to, but we can explore it and have a look at it and release it, change it, add to it, whatever needs to happen with it, because the art allows you to do that. That's what I love.
Is it a sense as well of giving control back to people? in circumstances where they may feel a complete lack of control. It's getting that control back.
Yeah, control can be a big element, but also I think sometimes we have our experiences and we don't know why we were reacting to certain things, or there's things playing out that we can't quite work out for ourselves. You know, why did I react to that? Why am I feeling particularly lonely? Or, you know, why do I feel like I need to latch onto that thing? So control is part of it. And I guess part of the empowerment in art therapy is that the client does have control of what's happening as well. So quite often it depends on what the issue is that we're working on. So that's why it's really hard to talk about art therapy, because you can't go, okay, if somebody has this, then we're going to do this, because it's so individual. But I think the empowerment of being able to go wherever you need to go is really good. And yeah, when people feel out of control, that's a perfect time to come and do art therapy, because it's like, well, how do we go from chaos to control's a funny, interesting word, but, you know, to calm, or, you know, peace, or whatever you want to call it. So how do we go from stress to balance, or, you know, highly emotional that's getting in the way of living? Because I don't think we don't need to discount our emotions. They're very real and they're there for a reason. And I think with the highlight reel that we see sometimes on social media and things, it's really important to know that your feelings are valid and not to discount them. So it's one of those interesting things of trying to make sense. I think making sense rather than control is probably the word of what's happening for me and what do I do with that.
So it's almost a way to navigate what might be happening for you in your life at the time.
Yeah, definitely. And quite often I have people who come and see me and they're like, I just feel like there's something else and it makes no sense. You know, like I want to change careers, or, you know, I've got these big life events happening and logically it doesn't make any sense, but there's something within me that's telling me I need to do this. And so the great thing is that we can explore that and have a look. Well, what's happening in your gut and your heart? What's happening in your head? What are the logistics? How does this all work together? So it's really about that. You know, the reality is that sometimes things don't make sense. And so hopefully art therapy can provide that space where you can make sense of things, and new information can come up and you can look at it and just see. You don't have to make life decisions in the art therapy session, but it's information that might be useful. So I think that's really good as well.
So recently the World Health Organization declared burnout as a valid diagnosis. Did you want to speak to that specifically?
Yeah, definitely. When I first saw that, I thought, oh, that's really interesting, and how exciting that the World Health Organization would recognise that we actually have this epidemic going on at the moment where people are just, you know, going beyond. And burnout isn't just tiredness, it is complete depletion of everything that happens. And so people are really debilitated by it. It's interesting because it was first reported that they were going to put it as a condition, but they've come back and actually talked about the fact that it's a syndrome, which I think is an interesting concept. But I think it's just really exciting that it's on the agenda, and because the more awareness we can have, the better off our society will be. And I think there's a few contributions to that, and it's the fact that sometimes there feels like there's a pressure that we have to be on all the time, and that's not our natural state. You know, we need to have stillness in our life and downtime, but we are stimulated constantly. And I think that's why there's a rise in people doing meditation or reflection groups and things like that as well, because we're seeking that stillness as well. And I think it's really great that the World Health Organization have put it on the agenda, because it is something that is happening a lot. And quite often in organisations, and some of the people that I've worked with who are heading towards burnout, you know, their performance isn't like they would normally have. Their attitude has changed. They just don't get the passion out of things that they used to get. And then they get performance managed, which then adds this whole other anxiety to it. And so quite often, and what I've seen with some of my clients who have been in this situation, is that just fuels it even more. And then they feel more inadequate, and then this whole other thing plays out. And so if we can get more people knowing about burnout and knowing the signs of burnout, you know, there are simple things for each person. You know, if there's a shift in you or things that you're passionate about, just you don't care about anymore, you know, that's something to explore so that you can prevent burnout, because it's one of those things you don't just flick a switch and suddenly you're burnt out. Mm-hmm. It is a slow process that really builds on each other. And I think the awareness and what we all need to do and actually put it into action. So for instance, I know for myself, I know lots about what I should be doing, but whether I do it or not is a whole other thing. And sometimes when you are heading for burnout or there's mental illness and things happening, it becomes really hard to do those things that you know are good for you. And quite often the first thing that goes is the things that we enjoy. And so it's about that awareness, and I think that's a really positive thing. And in the art therapy field, you know, we work with people who are burnt out quite often because it's got to crisis point. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could get people to explore what's happening as they're just starting to feel a bit different, rather than when it's at crisis point? Because coming back from burnout is a huge task. It's not unachievable, but if we could nip it in the bud before it got too dramatic, then I think we would be all a lot better off. And so that's why I've got a passion for going into organisations and helping people with their wellness on lots of different levels, and using art therapy as the medium, because we're so stressed, we're so busy, and we actually need to probably come back to ourselves rather than the external all the time. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with not looking at your emails at night. You know, putting boundaries in place and things like that. Social media is amazing, but it also has brought this anxiety around everyone looks like they've got it together. You know, the highlight reel, you know, so people on the weekends, it seems like everyone's having a fantastic life. And what does that do for us looking at that when we may not be feeling the best? And so that's where things like art therapy can really help, because the reality is everyone has bad days, everyone has stress, but how do you manage it? And how do you work through it? And I think having a space to reflect is a key part of that. So very exciting that it's on the agenda for the World Health Organization, and it's opened the conversation, and I think that's a real positive.
And it's very aligned with, I guess, Ignite Art Therapy's new programs that are coming up as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so I have just decided to have a 3-month program when I see people one-on-one, because I think you can do a one-off session and it's brilliant and amazing and you can do great things, but wouldn't it be amazing for you to spend a session a fortnight for 3 months just reflecting and building on what's actually happening? So as you change, you can reflect on what's happening, or as situations unfold, how do you manage that? And so I think there's something about being consistent, and I've had a few people who I've trialled this with, and it's been amazing where they've got to, because it is, okay, I'm immersing myself, I really want to reflect on my life and what it means. I feel like there might be something else about to happen. How do I navigate that? So it's amazing to actually work consistently with someone and really help them get more confidence, feel like they can make shifts in their life, better relationships, being more connected to their children, actually enjoying work. You know, there's so many different things that come out for each individual, and the fact that we can work together for 3 months means that we can get a long way together and get comfortable in the space and really explore and express what they really want. And that sounds like a Spice Girls song. But yeah, that's the whole key, and that's why I'm shifting to that. That to work with me one-on-one, it's a commitment of 3 months so that we can get where you want to get and work together to do that.
So what programs are you running as part of the Ignite Art Therapy's suite of programs?
So the individual program will be a 3-month where people can sign up, you know, to work one-on-one with me. There's also, I'm in development of a thing called Creative Gym, which will be a monthly membership, and we will have various time slots where people can just come and spend some time exploring and reflecting on things. So it won't be a full art therapy session, but it'll be that sense of community and coming together and just touching base with where you're at. There is the 6-week program that's in development as well that will really have that real sense of community and a group where people will get to know each other, but also reflect on where life is at. Am I stressed? Am I busy? Are my relationships not what I would like them? Do I just need some time and space for myself? And so that will be facilitated by myself and be very deliberate in the way where we go with it, depending on who the participants are and what they will want from the program. But that will really be about using that space to get what they need to get and what they would like to get out of life, and just having a really more in-depth explore. I've also got a collaboration that's happening with an organisation called Smith and Wellness and the Conflict Coach. So Kate Russell and Beck Smith are amazing practitioners who both work in their field. Beck has a concept called mental fitness, which is incredible, and that's like a really holistic approach in how you can actually look after yourself. It's not just about any one component, it's about this whole model that she's developed, and it's really exciting to work with her. And Kate works in the conflict space, so she goes into organisations and helps with conflict, and so together we have this brains trust of coming at the same thing from different angles. So Beck really looks at neuroscience and how we can really help with that. So what we've actually decided to do is really work with middle managers, because quite often they have a complex workplace structure because they are accountable to the people above them, but also trying to work with the people below them. And how do you do that? So they're almost, we talk about it being, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And what are their own personal needs as well? Because managing people is quite complex, and when conflict arises, quite often people will avoid it. But what we actually need to do is actually lean into it and work through it and have a look at it, because what's underneath it, what's not being spoken about, but also how can we develop that workplace and how can we personally explore and really work together in creating great workplace cultures. And so we're starting with this program. It's called the Shift Series, and it's really exciting to have 3 of us collaborate and work with managers on their own well-being and their own thoughts and what's happening for them and what's challenging. How do you break through those challenges? How do you navigate everything that's happening in the workplace? So there's lots of things happening on lots of different levels for me.
So you're a very busy woman, Bel, and I know that one of the other organisations that you're a part of is Connected Self. So would you like to tell us a little bit about your involvement with Connected Self?
Yeah, Connected Self is an amazing organisation that really helps young people and vulnerable people work through their stuff. So it works on lots of different levels. So Sean and Kath Lappin have done incredible work in helping in so many different ways. So it works on a few levels. They have psychologists, art therapists, but also mentors that work with vulnerable young people as well. And one of the exciting things that's happened this year is the real expansion of art therapy in schools. And so Kath has done incredible work in developing relationships with schools, and for them to see the benefit in art therapy, that young people have a place to express what's happening. In the classroom they might be misbehaving, but there's all of this trauma and life circumstance that's happening to them, and they don't have the words or the way to describe it. And so by having art therapists embedded in schools has been incredible, and so that has expanded, and I've been lucky enough to be part of Connected Self to help them with some of their art therapy, and it's been amazing work. And they're really at the forefront of where art therapy needs to go, but also therapeutic mentoring and, how do we help young people and how do we help them with what's happening. That's not just sitting in a classroom, that it comes from lots of different angles, and art therapy is a huge part of that. And it's I'm really proud to be part of Connected Self, actually. They have done incredible things and have a really, really strong vision for how we can help people with trauma and big life events that are happening.
So speaking of people that are experiencing trauma, and I guess people that may not be, what group or what person is best placed for art therapy services?
It's really hard to pinpoint exactly because I think everyone should do it.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's people who are feeling like their life isn't necessarily what they want.
Right.
So whether it's a child or an adult, so they may not have the word or vocabulary. I think about, for me in my business and the people that I see, it's quite often that something is not going as they would like. So I have this dream and this vision, I don't know how to get there. So it's not always that there's a problem. It can be just things that I'm going through the motions and there's something else and I need to find that. So art therapy works on so many different levels. So trauma can can be there because of so many different life circumstances. So the reason why art therapy works really well with trauma is because it goes beyond the language and it goes into the body. So it's not necessarily talking about the event or trying to find the words on how they're feeling about it. It's actually expressing it and exploring it. And we do need to be careful that we don't re-traumatize people with that. But it's also going into the body and the experience, because we hold lots of stress and trauma and experiences in our body as well. So it's using that somatic approach to really help with that. But it can be grief. I worked in palliative care for quite a few years, and the reason why art therapy works with grief so much is because it's very hard to articulate as well, and it's deep. It's deep work sometimes. But it also can be people who are in business and need to work out their plan. There's a whole spectrum of people, and I think anyone who needs to do planning, express things, look at their life, reflect, all of that stuff, art therapy is for them, because it works on lots of different levels, and a good art therapist will adapt to what the client needs. So it can be the real trauma approach, trauma-informed practice, but it also can be, I need to plan my life out and have a look at it. So there's a whole spectrum there as well. So sorry, it's hard to pinpoint the exact person, but for every art therapist, it would be a different type of client that they would see. Something I've been thinking a lot about is how our behaviour plays out in the moment, and quite often that is based on what our first family, the dynamics that have happened in our families and stuff. So, and how our reactions come back to that. And so that's something I've been really thinking about, is because quite often there's some people who talk about the fact that don't go back to the past. It's all, that will traumatise people. It's all too much. We need to step forward and look forward, which is fine. But the past is playing out in our present. And unless we actually do something with that, we're going to keep having the same behaviours. And so that's where art therapy can really help, because it's actually going, okay, where did this come from? The fact that I'm not getting along with my boss and I can't take authority, I can't take that, where my other manager was fine. What is it that's playing out for me? And quite often it is around what's happened previously. Was it a teacher? Was it a family member? Was it, has it triggered something where I felt less than, that I didn't feel worthy? And so then my behaviours come out to try and protect myself as well. So that's something I've been really thinking about, is how do we navigate that? Because Brené Brown talks about the fact that we all wear armour. We do that to protect ourselves. It serves a really good purpose. But also, how can we become aware of it so that we don't have to do that, because we're wearing armour when we don't need to as well. So that's something I've been pondering a fair bit of.
So art therapy can also be a technique that's used to dig deeper beneath conflict?
Definitely, yeah. So quite often our reactions to things, when you just have that person who you don't know why, but they seem to push your buttons all the time, is not actually about the other person. It's actually about us and our experiences and what we're reading into the situation. And so I really love, like Brené Brown's just done the release Dare to Lead, and in that book there's actually some really good stuff around how to actually look at that, because we tell ourselves stories, but the reality might be very different to that, and people have completely different perspectives. So I don't know about you, but I know with my siblings we might talk about something that happened in our childhood, and then, you know, my sister will pipe up and say, no, that's not what happened. And then my brother's like, no, well, this is what happened. And then it ends up in, not that we argue, but it ends up in a heated discussion about what the truth was.
Yeah.
And the truth for each of us is
different.
Real.
Yeah.
You know, it's, but then it's like, well, what do we do with that? And how does that information and how do we react to that is all based on our own experiences. And I think it's really important that we explore things when we're having a reaction to things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when someone makes us feel less than, or, you know, nobody makes you, but we feel less than, or we feel intimidated, or we feel like we need to protect ourselves, or, you know, we hide and withdraw, or we want to run for the hills. What's happening for us in that? And that's where art therapy can really help in so many different ways. And the thing I love about art therapy is it continues to amaze me. I don't know where we're going to go when there's a session, but where it takes people is incredible. You know, they're like, oh my God, I never realised that had such an impact on my life. But because we've had a look at what's happening, and it's safe to do that in the art, because we're not talking about ourselves, the symbolism and metaphor plays out. And I think that's really powerful, and that's the stuff I really love, because it's like, wow, this is all sitting in our unconscious, this is part of our behaviour. And in order to change it, we need to look at it and work through it and do what we need to do. So sometimes it's releasing things, sometimes it's adding things into our life, and we can do that. And it's amazing what a piece of art can do to help our own well-being.
So Bel, you, in your role as lecturer for Ikon, what are you going to be teaching for the remainder of the year? What's the next teaching subject that you're doing?
I'm doing an elective.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is called Working with Young People. So it's really exciting, because that's where I started with my therapy career. I guess I didn't know that I was going to end up being an art therapist, but I started in a senior secondary school. So what will be great about that subject is I'll be able to talk about why working with young people is a different way to work. How do we actually do that? I love in Ikon classes how there's the experiential component, so people are giving things a go, you know, doing presentations in a different way. So it's rather than just absorbing information, it's actually, well, what does this mean for my practice, and how do I actually work through that? So I'm really looking forward to having the discussions that we have, looking at examples, but also having the students immerse themselves in how to work with young people and how do we do that effectively, because every age group or every different client group that we work with, we need to communicate differently and possibly work in a different way. So I'm really looking forward to that.
That's great. And I think that elective sits between the Bachelor of Arts Therapy and the Bachelor of Counselling and Psychotherapy.
Yes, so it's not just art therapy focused specifically, but obviously I bring my experience as a counsellor and an art therapist into the space. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Fantastic. And just following on from that, what are the elements that you think make a good therapist?
It's really interesting when I try and capture what makes a great therapist, because I think sometimes I have lots of people come to my rooms who've had a really bad experience. Or I know when I worked in schools, you know, people will have a not so nice experience with one person and then taint everyone in that same industry like that. So I think it's really important to really, if a therapist doesn't suit you or it's not working for you, that you actually find someone who does. Because when you are in a space where you are revealing things about yourself and trying to work through things, it's important that you feel safe. And part of that, from the therapist's point of view, is presence. I think that's the key to therapy. So it's not that the therapist has an agenda, that they're person-centered, that they're actually listening and working with the client rather than I'm the authority and this is what you need to do. I don't believe therapists should give advice unless it's asked for or it's working through something together, because that disempowers the client themselves. And it's really important, and the perspective that I work from is that the client has the answers. They just need help finding it. So how do we do that? And I think the key to that is actually being present and listening, and not just hearing, like truly listening and truly being there and helping them track where they're at, but reflecting back what you hear, because sometimes there's real incongruent things that are happening, but the client doesn't see that for themselves. So your role as a therapist is to facilitate that and reflect back so they can see it for themselves. But also it's not just being nice all the time. I mean, obviously people in the caring industry are nice people, but sometimes it's about the challenge for the client as well, for them to see things differently and work through things. So it's not being nasty, it's actually just going, okay, well, what I'm hearing is this, but you said this, so how does that all sit together? And so it's really being aware and present and listening and ensuring that what you're reflecting back to the client is for their benefit. I've had examples of clients who've come to me who've said they felt like their counsellor or psychologist or whoever it was, all they did was talk about themselves. You know, self-disclosure from a therapist's point of view needs to be done with the client in mind. So it's not about imparting your knowledge and my experience is this. It's actually being there for the client, and that's the key to great therapy, because the client has the answers. We just work together to find it together. And in art therapy, we use the art to help with that. But in talking therapies, it's what you say and how you are and how it all works together. Yeah. So, and you know, none of us are perfect, but ideally it is those components that really make great therapy, and just that sense of safety. That's the key to everything with therapy, because it does take a lot of courage to pick up that phone or look online and check out somebody who you think might help you through something. And the last thing you want is to get there and not feel like you connect. You know, you're not in tune with each other, because that's a really important part of therapy, and being able to do that. And your therapist has the qualities that you need for the certain situation that you have as well. So that's an important part.
So what is your favourite thing about art therapy, or maybe some of the things that you like about art therapy?
I think the thing I love about art therapy is it continues to amaze me. Like I can't say that enough. But also it's the fact that people have aha moments and they got there themselves. Like I love that. I love that the art can mirror something that they couldn't see before or couldn't experience. But also the fact that a splash of paint can say something about the way that they're feeling, or, you know, building something and it not sticking together can say something in itself. So I love the things that happen in the moment that are not planned, that just inform and express something that you can't do with words. That's what I love about it. But also when I develop workshops and things like that, the whole idea of there's a concept that people would like, and the fact that I develop something that helps people to explore and hopefully get to that point. I really love that connection, that we're not just having a PowerPoint where it's like, okay, you should know these concepts and this is what happens. It's actually people going, okay, what does this mean to me? How do I explore this for myself? And how does that concept come out of that? Like, I love that aspect, that we talk in symbolism and metaphor all the time to describe other things, and that's why art therapy is so rich and so full of content. But it's also what's happening internally for me, because I'm interacting with this art, and how does that work? And I love when people get messy, even though it's a big cleanup sometimes. Like, life is messy, so you know, that's reflected in the art as well. Or to see people who could be like, are quite controlled, and you know, to see them let that go and be in flow and relax in the art, like, that's incredible, that they can be something that they haven't been comfortable with before. I love that aspect. It just brings so much richness, and it's the unexpected, I think, that I love about art therapy.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Bel.
Thank you.
If anyone would like to know more about Bel's practice, you can go to ignitearttherapy.com.au.
Yes.
And to know more about Ikon's courses, you can visit ikoninstitute.edu.au.
Yes, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.